Do you want to do any like voice exercises?
Me.
Larissa, keep that in for sure.
That'll have to stay. All right. Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs. It's been 50 years. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal.
I know it is. What number am I?
You are a 7.
3. I am totally a 7, which is funny. I feel like 7s should be into sports just because they like it's like the ultimate shared experience.
It is.
And I just don't care.
All people from all places.
I know.
Of all walks of life.
I know. Even the Pope, the 2 popes, that's something I picked up on a lot in that movie. It was like,
they loved that soccer game, Germany versus Argentina.
We're not going to go into how much I don't like or don't care. I mean, it's not don't like. I just don't care.
You like sports.
I just don't care about them. Yeah. But this is a big deal.
Chiefs, you care about the Chiefs.
The Kansas City Chiefs. First time, 50 years, going to the Super Bowl. It's on Sunday.
Candy bars cost apparently 6 cents. At least that's what I heard.
The last time they were in the Super Bowl?
On the radio.
Wow.
Some lady said, yeah, the last time the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, I could get a candy bar for 6 cents.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
So that's what's happening in Kansas City right now.
We have our gear on.
If you're watching us on video, you might see it. This was only just recently purchased because
don't have any
sports shirts, but now I do. And we got this banner behind us.
Yep.
For those that are listening on the podcast, you should check us out on YouTube because we're now there. Although we're still trying to figure out if YouTube really wants us to be there, but that's a whole other conversation.
Ooh, interesting.
We got some interesting stats back on the first episode. So
just keep breaking rules.
Keep breaking the rule. I mean, I do what I want.
That's right.
Well, cool. So last episode we talked about learning, and we kind of went all over the place, but we went back to the roots.
It's kind of a big topic.
It's a big topic. We're trying to unpack this. If you didn't catch last episode, Dan and I are on this journey. We're a backpacking trip, if you will, without backpacks or the jungle or maybe.
You just said or the jungle like we're. It's like someone took away the ecosystem.
Yeah. I don't know what happened.
Do you have your tools? Do you have your ecosystem?
Nope. We're in a loft. I don't know. We're in an old lofty building. It's cold. There's artificial light everywhere. And would you say we have our compass? Yeah, we know what direction we're heading, which is we've spent the last 10 years just learning as fast and as much as we can in order to make our company survive, right, and to flourish in the process. And I think that has led to a lot of our success and a lot of the fun that we're having doing what we're doing. And so we thought, this is something that we should try to figure out. How can we articulate, how can we give some structure to what maybe we've accidentally done over the last few years, and accidentally and intentionally. I mean, it's both of those things at the same time, but we didn't have a framework. We didn't have a guide. We didn't have a map.
What we're talking about now, we were living.
Yeah.
We're almost like now reflecting on what we were doing. We were doing a lot of learning. We were reading a lot of books.
Yep.
Wrapped in...
No, we can't go back. We are no longer in the hunting lodge.
No, we're not. No, reading a lot of books, asking a lot of questions, going to a lot of conferences, watching a lot of videos on what does it mean to lead? What does it mean to run a business?
What does it mean? How do you build technology? How do you design? Everything that we know how to do now, we had to learn because basically we were saying yes and figuring it out. That was the option 5 moment. If you don't know what option 5 is, go back and listen to the old episodes. So continuing that conversation, the first episode of this kind of next phase of the podcast was, we think it's about learning. We think it's about constantly learning. We think it's about doing it all the time. We talked a little bit about kind of exploratory learning where you're doing, or you're learning by doing. And then of course there's the academic style of learning. And I'm sure there are words for that, right, for these styles of learning. And actually I think we will find those. We'll do some more research as we dig deeper. But
I think it's important to say that we learned a lot. It's not that we learned a lot the first 10 years and now we've made it and now we can just coast.
Yeah. We're still learning.
Yeah. And we mentioned that a little bit in the podcast of the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Yep.
So within individuals, which is so true, I mean, there's this idea of lifelong learning, and that's how it's really important also for just mental health and brain health is this idea of, I think it's called neuroplasticity. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm reading some stuff on that right now, and that for adults, for kids, it's easy. They're just doing it because they're growing.
Yep.
I think the highest rates ever is like between like birth and like age 2 or 3. And then it starts again around puberty. So they age 11 through like 14, 15.
Sure.
But it can continue as adults. But you have to be very intentional, and you have to basically pick up these disciplines and these habits of lifelong learning, whether it's learning a new language, learning how to play an instrument.
Yep.
So these lifelong learning habits for an individual have to translate, or at least we think, over to a team or an organization as well.
Yeah.
Is that the intelligence of the organization doesn't have to reach a certain point and now we're going to reach success. It has to be, we're continually learning. And so it's interesting to think that if someone were to say, what have you learned over the last 10 years? We could say a lot of different things.
Right.
But it's kind of meta in that we've learned
to learn.
That process of learning is
the most
what's
important
getting
thing.
us to where we're going, and we want to continue it.
Yeah. So as we kind of maybe even asking ourselves, how do we better put some guidelines or maybe some process in place to help us to have that mindset all the time? We've been playing with some words. Honestly, is really what it comes down to, is that we're playing with this kind of structure and a framework of how to think about learning. And now there are lots of frameworks for learning. I mean, obviously there's a whole academic world that exists around ways to learn, and that's fine. They're all good. We're borrowing and stealing from most of them. But we're trying to come up with something that seems natural for us, is close to the language that we use on a regular basis here at Crema, or that we see our peers using. And so we thought we'd take you through what that is. And honestly, we're going to poke holes in it as we go because we're still fleshing it out.
We're going to poke holes in our own thinking.
Yeah. And we're still learning. We're still trying to figure out, is this the right thing? And honestly, the way that I learn, especially when trying out something new, is just by practicing it, just throwing it out into the world, seeing how the world reacts, looking at your face and going, does he like what I'm saying?
If he doesn't, I'm going to change the way I communicate it.
Adapt a little bit. Let me say, if I said it with like this voice, is it better?
Like a little bit of, I'm unsure.
Inflection. Just a posture of humility. Yeah. So I think in the last episode, we did mention the 3 points of discipline, structures, and posture. We're going to table that for another conversation because we're still fleshing that out.
We're diving deep into that right now.
Yeah. But what we want to talk about today is a process, a flow of ways to think about learning. I think it starts with the simple act of paying attention. And I want to explain a little bit what I meant when I added this. So a lot of it's taken from lean. Probably lean was the most influential thing that ever came along for me when we were first getting started in this idea, maybe 7, 8 years ago. And the basic principles of lean are build, measure, learn. And it's a loop, right? And the great thing is you have to do something, you then measure it and kind of get feedback from it, and then you adapt and iterate and do it again and move forward. It's great because it's super simple, but it missed some things about like, well, how do I choose what I do, and how do I make a decision on how to move forward?
Yeah. Where do I start?
Right. And so, looking back in the last 10 years, I used to, I think what I used to say was, I'm only a decent designer because I just happen to pay attention to more design than my clients do. Meaning, I decided to focus in on something. I decided to say, you know what, I like designing. I have a bit of a talent for that, But the reality is I love looking at interfaces. That sounds so nerdy. I say it.
I look at screens.
I have a social life, I promise. I like looking at interfaces. I like seeing how other people designed things. I like looking at the aesthetics of something and the functionality of something and go, ooh, how did they do that? I like unpacking it and just paying attention to it. And because I was specifically paying attention to UI or user experience, I became good at it. I just because I was looking at it more than our clients were. So they would come to us and say, we need a designer. And it was like, oh, cool. Well, I've looked at more designs than you. So you pay me and I'll help you do that for you so that you don't have to look at a bunch of designs. I've done that.
Would you say that as you were paying attention to UI, UX, what aspect of that helped? Was it you looked at a lot and went, so it's I guess the saying of, did you go like an inch deep in a lot? Or did you pick a few things and you got really curious and you went like a mile deep into a few? So like we sit right across from the Performing Arts building.
Yeah.
And so if someone's really interested in architecture and they were to walk past that building, they could say, look at that building. I've never seen anything like that before. I'm curious. I'm going to pay attention to it. They could spend a year learning about the building.
Everything about that.
Or that could also inspire them maybe to go look at another building, maybe look at tons of buildings. So I mean, there's
getting into architecture
as a
topic. Yeah. I think at the time it was when the App Store had just first come out. So it was kind of a new landscape of things of experiences that were showing up that we'd never seen before. App Store, that was, we now take it for granted that that's just a thing that everyone knows. We all have apps. It was so new. And so for me, it was just so interesting to go, oh, there's these things. And it's like, I kind of played video games. I wasn't a gamer per se, but I liked playing video games growing up. I was kind of a nerdy kid. And so when you got a new game, it was like, oh, cool, a new game. How's it designed? What's the gameplay going to be like, et cetera?
What are the challenges?
Yeah, what are the challenges, right. And then all of a sudden it was like an app store, and some of it was games, and some of it was just apps, but it was millions of them. And they were really accessible. And so I think probably there was a bit of maybe a mile deep into apps, whereas I could have gone and looked at designs of anything, but that mile deep into apps also went a mile wide because there were just so many that you could go look at. It was maybe, I think it was going a mile wide in the sense that there were so many apps that I could look at. And so it wasn't like I nerded out on skeuomorphism, which is this idea of like making things look like the real thing in design, or it wasn't that I nerded out on tabs or cards or anything like that. It was that I was really focused into apps. Mobile apps were probably what got me started, but then, I had just gotten a new computer. So I was looking at every SaaS service. SaaS products were becoming a thing, software as a service. So I was checking out all these apps. Didn't care as much about websites. I kind of started to lose interest in that pretty quickly. But that was definitely in play. But it was very focused in this area.
So it sounds like there's something deeper to paying attention than just looking and like seeing. Like So obviously observation. So you observed something. And I would assume that either by, natural inclination or maybe a natural curiosity or something to where, because you can pay attention to a lot of different things.
Sure.
I mean, your brain sees in
sports
so much. Yeah, exactly.
I don't pay attention to it, but there are people that obsess about it.
Right. Well, I mean, and statistics and, there's just a whole business just based off, the analytics of sports. I mean, there's companies built purely off of that.
Fascinating.
And so there's probably a natural inclination that is paired with that attention that causes you
Sure.
Because attention is active, and then something causes you almost to pause.
Right.
And stop. And maybe a takeaway, as I think about it for myself and for our listeners, is that if you're paying attention and something causes you to stop, like turn aside and look, you might lean into that a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, that's good, because I think it can be decision paralysis if you try to pay attention to everything. Yeah, it's real. And I think
that's good.
You go to, I know there's a science behind it, but the idea that like our eyes only, they basically filters out 90% of what we see. Our brain filters out 90%.
And it fills it in.
Yeah.
Like it fills.
It becomes this like, if I attempt it, I'm just looking straight into your eyes. It's a lovely place to be. if I look straight into cover yourself, I am seeing billions of things around us, but my brain's going, all you need to really see is his eyes, which is very uncomfortable to do for a long period of time. And it's just such an interesting thing. And I think the same thing goes for our attention span of what we're trying to pick up and what we're paying attention to. So it does take some level of focusing your brain. So I use the analogy of when you're going to buy a car, right? And, I'm going to go buy a Nissan Altima or whatever. And then all of a sudden you just see Altimas everywhere.
Because you're paying attention.
Right, because you're paying attention. Your mind is tuned to that. And I think that whatever your topic is, so if we start applying it back to business, whatever the topic is that you need to grow in leadership, you need to grow in a skill or a craft, you need to think about the architecture of your space, or you need to think about how to run meetings better. If you start tuning your mind into the topic, then you'll notice that you start to pay more attention to it. And maybe you can more actively decide, oh, you know what, I need to pay more attention to that thing, which means that you'll have to kind of turn off some other areas. And that's a decision making. What am I going to turn off so that I can pay attention to this thing? Because if I try to do all of it, it just nothing will get done. And
it's kind of fun to think about that process can be, I don't want to say whimsical, but it can be spontaneous. Like again, you're driving down the road or whatever, something catches your eye. I'm like, I've never seen that before. I want to look into that. So that could be just spontaneous. Which I would think that if something catches your eye naturally, your draw to learning about that might be, I don't want to say easier, but what's the word I'm looking for?
More enjoyable?
Yeah, more enjoyable just because something like there's an excitement there. Versus you're like, oh, I need to learn about that for like either a project or this is where our next big thing we need to pay attention to.
Interesting.
And so I think, but I guess my hypothesis is if we use the same process of being attuned, that level of focus and attention and being attuned to it will bring a level of joy, even though it didn't start out joyful. It's almost the process creates joy.
That's interesting. And I think it's kind of like you're going to be forced to pay attention to things sometimes. And that may actually not be the most fun sometimes, depending on what it is. Right. You may not want to pay attention to a medical condition, but you have to.
That's a good point.
Or, things like that. But in the office environment, I think it's just being aware that there is a certain level. Maybe even we should think about the fact that there is a certain amount of attention that you can have. And I don't know how to measure that. But I know that the switching costs of
back and forth,
new thing. And I am, we all know, me being the quote unquote idea guy, the concepts guy, it's always the new next shiny thing. So my attention can shift a lot, which can be fun and good, but can be dangerous because if you don't stay focused on something to kind of really carry it through the experiment, it can fall down. We're not going to get through all these.
Let's get to the next one though.
Okay.
So the next one, collect.
Collecting. So I think this is a really fun one for me. So it's one thing to pay attention. You're observing, you're noticing things, but if you're not taking inventory in some way of, I guess what collecting is for me, and I'm still processing this one, what collecting is for me is a decision-making tool. Because what I want to do is say, I'll use an example. The marketing team or the growth team, we might say we want to grow our email list so that we can have more people that are subscribing to our email list and that we can get more content out. Well, how do we grow an email list? So there's obviously the research way of collecting, which is I'm going to go Google how to grow an email list, and you'll get certain things and you can start to collect those. So you can start to pull a repository down and group things together. And there's lots of exercises that can be done to collect ideas. But sometimes it's just a matter of I'm paying attention and I'm on somebody else's website and I see, oh, interesting. They have a pop-up that I hate those pop-ups, but they have a pop-up that is trying to get you to subscribe.
Right.
Oh, I'm going to take a screenshot and I'm going to put that someplace. but because that's me collecting ideas so that now I have this inventory or this repository of basically experiments to go try. And so that's kind of what I'm getting at with collect. It's one thing to pay attention and just be like, ooh, interesting. But it's another thing to go, no, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Let's pull these ideas in and start to kind of diverge in our thinking, pulling them all in so that we can then converge into an idea that we might run an experiment on.
So if we were to go back to the example of buying a car, you say, okay, I'm buying a new car. And
don't use me as an example for this.
Well, so you're driving, and the paying attention or the being attuned is you're really just taking in information about all the different cars you see around you, really.
Yeah.
And maybe you get online and you start do a little bit of research, but really you're just paying attention. Ooh, I like that car. Ooh, I like that car.
That style's cool. Or I want an SUV. Or I want a sedan.
And then the collection is almost like you're starting to narrow in. It's like, I really liked these two cars, and so I'm going to start collecting data.
Yep.
I'm going to start reading consumer reports.
That's right.
I'm going to start, collecting reviews on different car sites on what people have said about this car.
I may start to collect experiences. I might go do test drives and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So being attuned is more, it's not passive. You're actively looking, but
I think it is a passive activity.
Yeah. You're kind of,
it's an active passive.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of, you're making the choice to be active and being
in a passive activity.
Yeah. And then collection, it's like, okay, I'm now making a decision to go start to collect information and data on this topic, whatever it could be. It could be buying a car, architecture, user interfaces, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I used to do this with design. I used to do that with design, and the fact that there were sites that I don't see them as much. Maybe Dribbble is kind of that now. But where people would collect little pieces of interfaces. Yeah. So it was like, ooh, I need a tab. So I would just go take screenshots of every tab interface, every tab structure that I could find on any product, any design, any website. And I would just collect them all into a folder. And then I go, ooh, I want all the search bars. So I'm going to go find all the search bars I can possibly find, all of the, whatever. And I collect them all and I go, which one? I like this from this one, and I like this from this one. And then you kind of pull ideas out to create the best, hybrid version of it for your client or for yourself. That's definitely the way that I was doing it with design. I think we have a lot of activities that we do now with our clients or that we do for ourselves where we use workshops. And so we'll do activities like note and votes or brainstorming activities where you're just trying to get all the ideas out so you can collect them. So then you could narrow down onto the one that you're going to try. But it's now you kind of got this activity of getting ideas out, but for the purpose of having the options.
Right. And the collection phase is also where you might go to like several conferences.
Yeah.
Or workshops or master classes in order to collect data on, is this the direction we want to go?
Exactly.
Or is this something we need to consider for our business or whatnot?
Yeah. So to that point, I think a collection period can be short or it can be relatively long.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're trying to do. You may say, I'm just gonna collect on this for a while. What I don't want it to do is distract me that I need to start running experiments yet. I'm just gonna collect on it.
Right.
Because I don't have the time or I shouldn't be focused on this. And I don't want to bother anybody else. I've had to learn to do that as a leader because my tendency is to go, hey guys, let's run this next experiment. Well, we've got 5 other experiments we're running now. Oh, well, okay, cool. Let me just collect then for a while. And I'll just keep collecting ideas because I do think this is going to be important, something we should kind of play with or try, but maybe it's next month. And I'll introduce that experiment back to the team or let the team know, hey, we're on to the next thing. I think this is the next thing. And oh, by the way, look, I've been collecting for a while.
Right.
Let me share what I've found.
And I think that is it's a good segue into the next one, which is test or experiment. But I think it's also between the space between collection and testing and experimentation, there's probably some level of decision making of
100%
of when do we move forward into test experiment, or if you even do that at all.
Yeah.
And it probably takes takes wisdom as well, because sometimes you may be collecting something. It's like, you know what, this isn't a today thing. This is a next year thing, because maybe we're too early. And companies have actually not been successful because they were to market too early.
Right.
And so the whole idea of timing
right?
Timing the market, some things, it's working again.
It is working. Somebody put a battery in it. Sorry.
So let's move on then to test and experiment. And
but I think I want to support what you just said there. Because, so the next one is experiment.
Yeah.
I was talking to Tyler about this yesterday. Tyler's one of our director of strategy and design here. And we were brainstorming because we're actually going to try to workshop all this content, supposedly in like 2.5 weeks. Oh dear. I literally just freaked out a little bit. But what we talked about is actually that spot right there. I think that's one of the most difficult places for any stage of a company.
Absolutely.
Or team, or even individual.
Yeah.
Decision-making paralysis is a really scary thing.
Because in that space, you're determining, are we right?
Yeah.
Well, we think we're right. Are we confident enough to move forward with the experiment? Things like how much is the experiment going to cost? Do we have the time? Do we have the people? Yeah. That space, moving from collection to experiment, is probably the most exciting.
Yep.
But most important part of this entire process.
It's the one that gives me the most angst, honestly, because let's use Vera as example. So we have an app that's coming out of Venture Lab right now, and Vera is Scotty's just making faces in the background and I just got distracted.
It's a plant care app.
Yeah, it's a plant care app. Thank you. Getting me back on track. So Vera is a plant care app coming out of our Venture Lab team. It's taking off right now and pretty fast. It's really exciting. And we're getting a ton of awesome feedback from the community, which is exactly what you want.
Right.
Here's the problem. It's a team that just is doing it in their free time at an agency, has a little bit of free time because we're in between projects, but they have to figure out how to prioritize the feedback coming in. All good feedback.
Yeah.
Small team. How do you decide which experiment to run? How do you decide? They're collecting all the ideas.
Right.
So they've gone through, they're paying attention to their audience. They're listening to their audience. They're collecting the feedback. They're reading it. They're putting it into their Jira board. But what they are transparently struggling with is there's too much to do and we want to do it all. But how do we choose what's the right next thing to do?
Yeah.
So I think that's an area we need to spend some time on figuring out, maybe studying more decision-making tools, or I think we've done that with Daisy and Racy and things like that. But how do you, is there a scorecard? I don't know. I feel like there's something there that is an activity.
That could be another episode.
I know. So I don't want to spend too much time there, but I think that's an area that actually a lot of companies, a lot of teams, a lot of individuals really do need help with is how, get it, George. I've collected a lot of things.
Right.
But I'm having a hard time making a decision.
So we got about 5 minutes.
I know.
Let's quickly unpack. What does it look like? What are some ways that we either here at Crema or with our clients have experimented with an idea?
Oh, okay. So
getting into experiment.
So to remind people, we've gone through paying attention, collect. There's some type of decision making in between this, and then we would say that you need to experiment. You need to actually go do.
Right.
So we do that in a bunch of different ways, whether it's building a rapid prototype of a design. So that might be just some clicked up flat screens of a UI, or a functional prototype or an MVP, which basically is it's actually written in code, but it's pretty low code. It's not trying to make this monolithic thing. It's a very simple early version of a product. So those are ways that we would experiment on a product team. And that's pretty normal. I think the industry's talked about that. We don't need to unpack too much the fact that lean is this idea of building small, iterating, and then increasing. Internally, we do it a lot with, we'll run an experiment and saying, hey guys, we have a goal to, trying to think of, on the growth team, that's where my head's at. We have a goal to get 3 new videos or launch a podcast. So we'll try to figure out what's the easiest way to do that. We didn't do it with video. Oh, the video's been off for a while.
It's on. Yep.
That happened on the first episode as well.
So the idea of testing.
Yeah.
We even run that with, so the different leaders or managers here may test like a new way to conduct one-on-ones.
Yeah.
Good. It's like, hey, I've learned this new set of questions, maybe this new philosophy of asking certain questions to dive deeper into someone's performance, or, where do they want to go as an employee, or maybe some personal goals. we might test those questions with our own small group.
Yeah.
Come back and be like, these questions, awful.
It doesn't work.
That experiment
flat
failed
every time.
Yeah, but it's a way to test it that way, because the last thing you want to do is roll something that could have a pretty large impact to an entire company. So let's just test it with 2 or 3 people.
That's right.
And see what happens.
100%. So let's next episode dive a little bit deeper into this experimentation. But just to give you the full string, we talked about paying attention, collecting, deciding. I think there's almost the decision needs to be its own thing.
Yep.
Collecting, deciding, experimenting. So running the experiment on the thing that we decided on could be small, could be a big experiment. It depends. And then the last thing, or the last 2, just to touch them, and then we'll wrap up, is iterate and adapt. So like you said, those questions fell flat in one-on-ones. We're not going to do it. But are there different questions we should ask?
Right.
And so I think that's truly the lean model is right in there, right? So that little lean loop happens, and we would totally support that. It's agile, it's lean, iterative. We love it.
Right.
So that test and learn, iterate, adapt. That's happening all the time. Where I think after the loop is, we'll say, complete, or at least confident. Maybe complete and confident are different. Like you can be confident in something, but not 100% complete with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
At a certain point, I think there's a line that comes out of the loop, that you're not stuck in the loop forever, that you should then spin off and do kind of what we're doing right now, which is you should share or teach. So I think this idea of kind of the scientific community does this really well, where they will come up with an idea, they'll write a scientific paper on it, and then they'll publish it to the scientific community saying, here are my findings. Take it, understand it, share it, do something with it, run your own experiments against it. But I want you to know that it's a thing that will help raise the knowledge of the community.
Right.
And now your community maybe raise the knowledge of the team. I'm going to share something I'm doing individually with the team. So maybe our team can all get better together, or the team is going to share it with other teams so that the organization gets better, or the organization's going to share it with other orgs like we're doing right now. See what I mean?
Yeah. And I think teaching is the next phase, and even more learning that leads to probably mastery. Because there's been times where people have asked me to either, do some sort of talk, or, hey, can you teach this class, or can you come and present? And you get there, or in your prep, you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to teach this? I just do this. Like, how do I unpack all the things that I think about when I do this? And so actually building that plan and kind of stepping back and thinking about how would I go about teaching this? You actually relearn it and get better. Yeah. I think the degree to which you know something is the degree to how maybe successful you can teach it and replicate it. And if you can't teach it very well, then maybe you need to go back and reassess. Yeah.
This activity we're doing right now is that. We are trying to say, we want to share this thought that we have. But we're learning the thought as we're sharing.
It's like, what do we want to say? I don't know. We just do this.
These words are just coming out.
We actually have to write this down.
So that's the process. Again, pay attention, collect. I think we're going to have to throw decide in there. I don't want to have too many.
It's almost like a little offshoot. It's almost like its own little mini thing in the circle. Yeah.
And each of these are going to have a bunch of tasks underneath them.
Oh yeah.
But I do think there's a deciding is almost important enough to be its own thing.
Yeah. It's like a bridge.
Yeah.
Tyler would probably just go to town on like a visual
diagram. 2x2.
2x2 with the bridge in there.
A decision, an experiment, and iterate, and then teach. So that's kind of the 6 part. It was 5 parts before. Maybe it's 6. We'll see. Part process that we think goes into at least the way we've been learning, or the ways that we can see things learning. And there's a lot of other factors that I think we can unpack, styles of learning, how people learn. And we're going to do some more research on those things, but wanted to run that past you guys. So let's open it up. If you think this is right, or if you think it's wrong, we want feedback.
All the feedback.
So if you're watching it on YouTube, drop us a comment below. If you are listening on the podcast, leave us a comment on the on iTunes. We would love for you to rate us when you're leaving a comment. I think that's how that works. Give us a 5-star review. That actually tells the world that you want to kind of go along with this journey with us, to kind of help us learn more about what it means to grow really effective teams, really flourishing individuals, and successful organizations. And so thank you so much for listening. We are really excited. I'm having so much fun, although we totally realized at the last second we needed another episode on Monday. So we needed to record.
That's right.
So we got up early and we're here, we're doing it. And we just really appreciate you taking the time to listen. And as always, make sure you subscribe and then share this. You can grab a link on any platform you use. Right. Share it with your mom. Just your mom.
Just all the moms.
All the moms really need to know about this. Or really share it with your boss, share it with your coworkers. If you want your team to be thinking along with us, let's do this together. It'd be a lot of fun. So
awesome.
Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs.
See you guys next time.
My name's Gabby. I'm an application developer here at Crema. I mostly write code and make technical decisions for our products. I enjoy working at Crema because there's a real focus on the culture, which lets you do your best work and enjoy the people around you while you're doing it. Option 5 is a podcast by Crema, a digital product agency that creates web and mobile apps for disruptive companies and industry leaders. We believe that design, technology, and culture can help create a world where individuals and companies thrive. Learn more at crema.us.